Hi, everyone. How are you? I am author coach Candi Usher. I am an author of 19 books, writing 20, 21, and 22 right now. I have several series that are going. And I'm a life coach, helping women find peace in the midst of chaos, in the midst of trauma, and helping them to heal spiritually, one step at a time, client led, client focused. So tonight is reading Teasing Tuesday. So I will be reading my latest book, Beauty for Ashes. Um, it's a modern day story about Ruth, but it also brings to light, especially for women, the connection that we have with her and how God can take the ashes of our past and not only fertilize and grow us, but use it to help others, use it to connect with others and to help them see what it is that they need to grow from and to help them understand that they're not alone, that they're seen, that they are important, and that they are loved. There is a phoenix on the front. I always refer to my own story as being a phoenix because there were so many things that happened in my past, from domestic violence to losing a child to dealing with a mentally ill parent to so many things. And despite the tragedies of my life, God still loved me. God still was there. God still grew me. And that was what mattered the most to me. He burned up my past completely and totally. It's something that I can talk about and it doesn't hurt the same. It allows me to be able to pray for both of my exes when most people are like, I can't do that. There's no way with every hurt that you went through. I don't even understand how you do it. But I've forgiven them and I can pray for them honestly from my heart. And then the fact of God has renewed me every single time He's had to burn me up. Every time he's had to remake me, He's made me better than what I was before. And I'm grateful to God for that. I am thankful for that. The rose is showing this the beauty that comes from the things that people deem as ugly, as people deem as not worthy. Things that people say, no, you shouldn't be able to do that, or you can't do that because of who you were. The rose shows that your past does not determine your future. It doesn't. It doesn't determine who you're going to be. Ashes are fertilizer. It just helps you grow into something better, into someone better, into a new creature in Christ. But you have to allow for yourself to grow in those areas and be better in those areas. So, again, Beauty for Ashes. It is on all book platforms. It is in my TikTok shop. It's on Amazon. It's on Barnes and Nobles. It is on Everend. It is on Apple Books. It is on Google Books. It is on Hoopla. It is on Libby. There's a number of places to find the book. If you just type in author Candi Usher, you will find me and all of my books so far. Okay. The introduction says the story of Ruth is one well known in the Bible. It's a chronicle of how a woman goes from losing her husband, her brother in law, and father in law to unforeseen circumstances. The woman who chooses to stay with her mother in law at her weakest and saddest point instead of returning to her own home. Ruth chose a new life. Yeah, lost my place. Ruth chose a new life in a new place and chose to serve God when she was only just learning who He was. Some of us are going through a Ruth season right now. We feel like we've lost everything and everyone. God tells us to move to a place where we know no one. There's no family nearby, no neighbors known, a place that seems desolate at the time. Ruth was willing not only to submit to Naomi as her mother, but also to God as her father and guide. This modern day take will still hold to the life of Ruth and offer an insight that may never have been noticed. Proverbs 31:25 through 26. Strength and honor are her clothing, and she shall rejoice in time to come. She openeth her mouth with wisdom, and in her tongue is the law of kindness. Table of contents, or the name of the chapters. The first one is From the Ashes, and that is a poem that I wrote to go in the front of the book. Then Ashes, Moving Roots, Obedience, Hard Work, Prayer, The Promise, A Second Chance, The Blessing, Beauty, and a prayer for rebuilding. So there is a prayer at the end of the book. All right. Poem From the Ashes. From the ashes she rises, a phoenix, a flower new in Christ. God has burned away the woman she was and has blessed her with a new and better life. People will see her as she used to be. They can't let go of her past and pain. She refuses to let anyone take her back to the old her, the one whose head hung in shame. She's better now, her roots moved to greater. God has truly given her beauty for ashes. She understands that they only want that the only one wanting her to fail is Satan, who her former rehashes. This woman stands in her strength and passion. She holds her head high. This woman knows that God has healed her, so now she has told her past goodbye. Ashes. Ruth sat on the sofa, hugging the flag adjacent pillow. Her sobs had quieted, just tears streaming down her face. The house felt so much emptier and more silent. A few hours before, there had been a knock on the door. Two army soldiers, both officers in rank, stood on the doorstep. The moment Ruth opened the door to the knock, it was as if she knew who it was. The news showed the attack on the U.S. base in Kuwait. Ruth's mother in law, Naomi, and her sister in law, Abigail, had been watching the news along with Ruth about the attack. All three women broke down at the same time. Eventually, Ruth became numb. Naomi and Abigail could tell she wanted to be alone. Ruth wasn't the only one in pain. Naomi's husband, Jonathan, had lost his life a few months before the base attack in a car accident. They had been married for a little over 30 years. Everyone believed Naomi wouldn't survive because of how deeply the loss affected her. Her sons, Joel and Nathan, had been all she had left. Both had entered the military, following their father's footsteps, and it was through the military that they met their wives. Joel served in the army, Nathan in the Marines. They were stationed together at Burns Joint Command Base in Kuwait. Granted, Naomi saw Abigail and Ruth as her daughters, so naturally she cared for them as she did her sons. Abigail and Ruth had been staying with Naomi off and on to care for her. She was an adopted mother to the women. Abigail didn't seem as connected to Naomi as Ruth did. Maybe it was because she missed her friends and family back in Florida. Naomi lived in California because that was Jonathan's last duty station before he retired from the army. Joel and Nathan ensured they purchased homes near their parents' home. That that they could always be close to them, and their wives didn't have to be alone when the men were on deployment. Ruth was from Maryland. She was happy to leave the state when Joel asked her to marry him. Fort Meade was a decent city to grow up in, but not where Ruth wanted to spend the rest of her life. Her father had been a military man, strict and disciplined. His rank as a commanding officer led to how he managed his home. Not one person could be out of line. Ruth, being the only child, felt caged in when her father was home from deployments. Her mother was the obedient woman, always giving in to her husband's demands, no matter how bizarre they seemed. Ruth wanted to never Ruth wanted to never follow in those footsteps. Joel proved to be a different kind of soldier, one that was almost the complete opposite of their father. When Ruth and Joel married, Joel began looking for orders that would bring him closer to his family. His brother Nathan was already stationed at Marine Corps Logistics Base in Barstow, California. Abigail had moved there to be with him about 6 months after their wedding. Joel requested a transfer to Fort Irwin in the Mojave Desert. The orders were granted, and together he and Ruth left Fort Meade. Ruth didn't even say goodbye to her parents. Her father had been against the marriage, wanting Ruth to marry a man he had chosen for her. She knew that was not her destiny. Something about California drew her in. Ruth knew the state would be a new start for her. Naomi was from Oklahoma. She met her husband Jonathan while attending church near Fort Sill. He had come to experience a different kind of service than the one offered by the on base chapel. Jonathan was so glad he listened to the Holy Spirit and attended that particular church on that day. He and Naomi spent several months courting, and Jonathan knew who his wife was meant to be. Granted, he did pray and fast about it to make sure he had heard God clearly. Naomi was excited to stand and serve next to such a wonderful man of God. By the time Jonathan's orders were complete and it was time to move, he had become an ordained minister. This allowed him to serve the country in more ways than one. After arriving in Barstow, California, Naomi and Jonathan began their family. They raised Joel and Nathan in the church, ensuring they had a relationship with Christ. When the young man decided to join the military, Naomi worked to tamp down her fear of losing her sons during deployments. It was the same worry and fear she had for her husband when he was deployed. When Joel and Nathan got married, they were stationed in California so they could care for their parents and their later wives could feel safe while they were gone on deployments. Unfortunately, this was the last deployment Joel would be sent on. Ruth knew something was going to go wrong in the pit of her stomach, but there was no way to stop an army ranger from doing his duty. The man never shirked his responsibilities, even though it could cost him his life. The flag in Ruth's hand showed how faithful Joel was to his country. As Ruth sat there staring into nothingness, her phone began to flash. Hello? The quivering in Ruth's voice made it known that she was not okay, although she was trying to hold things together. Ruth, Abigail and I just received a visit from two Marine officers. They said Nathan is dead. He's dead, Ruth. Naomi's broken sobs echoed through the phone. Ruth leaned back on the sofa, still wrapping her mind around the flag in her head. They came by here too. She felt like reality was slipping away. She didn't hear Naomi's screams into the phone. Ruth walked out of her house like a zombie. Nothing made sense. The two army officers showing up at her door had to be a dream. Yeah, that's what it was. It was all a bad dream, and Ruth just needed fresh air. She would get to Naomi's house, and Naomi and Abigail would tell her that Joel and Nathan are on their way home from deployment. Yet, even as Ruth began taking those slow steps toward her mother-in-law's house, her mind began to accept what her heart already knew. Her husband, only 3 short years married, was gone. They hadn't even had children yet, wanting to wait until Joel was able to have orders that would allow him to experience the pregnancy and birth without deployments looming over his head. That dream was now gone. Each step to Naomi's house was like dredging through wet cement. Ruth arrived at the house feeling tired, although she had not walked far. She opened the door knowing it was unlocked. Mama Naomi, where are you? Ruth called. The house was eerily quiet. I'm in here, Naomi answered. Ruth walked to Jonathan's former study. Abigail was standing next to the desk where Naomi was sitting. Both women looked haggard. Abigail walked over to Ruth and hugged her tightly. The women started to cry anew, which broke Naomi down again. He's gone. Nathan is gone. What am I supposed to do with my life? Abigail's wail filled the house. After some time had passed, the three women calmed down enough to have a conversation. I have been ignoring calls all day. My phone won't stop ringing. I know people are offering their condolences, but I just can't listen right now. Naomi shook her head. Mama Naomi, it's okay. Our phones have been going off too. I can't even get in touch with my parents to let them know what happened. Abigail sat in the chair next to Naomi. Ruth glanced at her cell phone. I have a lot of missed calls, but none are from my mother. Her face collapsed. Ruth felt like her mother could have called to console her, or at least sent a text. All her friends from back home had sent Facebook messages and made posts as if they were the ones who suffered the loss more than Ruth. There were so many tags that Ruth couldn't keep up. She noticed that Abigail had been tagged as well. She looked up to see Abigail's shocked face. Abigail! Ruth moved fast enough to catch Abigail before she landed on the floor. Naomi jumped out of her chair to help with laying Abigail on the floor. I'll go get a cool cloth and some smelling salts. Naomi ran out of the study. She returned a few minutes later and went to Abigail to help wake her up. Ruth slightly raised her head to make Naomi's job easier. Naomi placed the cloth on Abigail's head and then the salt under her nose. Abigail awakened mid-scream. Why? Why can't people just let us grieve in peace? Abigail wailed. She handed her phone to Ruth. Those who were against the war had started attacking their family. There were messages and memes on Abigail's Facebook page. Ruth was sure that if she opened hers, she would find the same thing. It never made any sense that those who attacked people who defended the country seemed to forget that those who chose to serve in the American military protected the very freedoms that allowed them to spew their hate and vitriol. It always broke Abigail, Ruth, and Naomi's hearts to read those messages when their husbands were alive. It was even worse since the men's lives were gone. There were comments and posts about the command and the war all over the family's social media. I can't do this. Abigail was on the verge of breaking down. I want to go home. Ruth understood that there was no way Naomi could replace Abigail's family in this situation. Are you willing to stay long enough for the funeral? All I'm asking is for you to help support Mama Naomi through this. After that, you can go back to your family in Florida. Can you do that? She spoke in the calmest voice, although there was a tempest of pain, disappointment, and anger raging in her heart. Abigail looked over at Naomi. How soon can we have the funeral? All right. Thank you, everyone who joined and came up. I appreciate you so much. I do. And you all have a blessed and wonderful day. Bye.